engine optimization and marketing experts, Robert O'Haver and Matt Weber. Powered by the Robert Palmer family of companies.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Search Talk Live. It's been 2 weeks now, and I'm glad to be back on the show. Matt, how's it going?
Hey, it's doing fantastic. Got a great crowd here today. They're very enthusiastic.
It cracks me every time you clap. It's funny. But today we are, we're over 52,000 plays and downloads of the show now. Quite amazing. Lots going on. It's just it's been a crazy week for me, and you're running a whole agency, so I'm sure
it's been a very busy week. But we got a lot of listeners in Houston, and so I think we got to say to everybody in Houston that our thoughts and prayers are with you, and we're thinking about you. And it's an unbelievable situation out there.
Yeah, it is crazy. Our prayers go out to you guys, and hope everybody's okay. Jesse, I know you're in that area. Who else? I can't remember all the people. Anyway, Keith Good, I believe, is over there. But stay safe. I hope everybody's fine. Anyway, today we got another great show. We're talking about writing for SEO. And don't mistake that for writing for search engines, because we are writing for people. But the people come first, obviously.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things that we can probably explore in this show, is that very narrow intersection between satisfying the needs of the user and satisfying the needs of the search engine. Exactly. It's a very, very fine intersection.
It is. It's a very fine line. But those of you tuning in for the first time, I do want to tell you about the show. We are a digital marketing podcast. We talk everything from SEO to content writing to social media. I mean, we cover it all, really. We are on iHeartRadio 24/7. If you really like the show, you can listen to us all day long. If you go to iHeartRadio, type in Search Talk Live. We have a dedicated station now, which is fantastic. You can go to our website, Search Talk Live, and listen and download other shows there. You can also sign up for our newsletter to find out what's coming up next for the next few shows. And you visit us on Spreaker, SPREAKER.com, and follow us there. You can also get all the notifications and updates there. We're about 6,500 people following us now on that platform. And anyway, without further ado, let's get started.
Yeah, I think this is also going to be a great show that people want to send in their questions. It's a topic so if you go to Twitter and use the hashtag SearchTalkLive, we're monitoring that right now, and we'll get your questions in there. You can also email Robert at SearchTalkLive, and we'll get your questions on the air. This is definitely a note-taking episode.
Yeah. Put on your SEO hats, your content marketing hats, and listen in. Also, if you're interested in being a guest on the show, I do want to mention you can email me, robert@searchtalklive.com, if you're interested, and we'll check you out and see if you've got what it takes to be on the show. But our guest today, Kristin Zhivago, thank you. She's the president of Zhivago Partners. How are you doing today, Kristin?
I'm great. How are you guys doing?
Great. We are really glad to have you on. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I've been in marketing for a very long time, mostly in the tech industry. So I was in tech before tech was cool. And now, of course, just kind of grown up with the web and everything web. And we are pretty much a classic digital marketing agency. We do everything digital. Of course, marketing is pretty much all digital now anyway for most people. Mm-hmm. So that's what we do. And we have a team of people that work on a lot of different things. We have a lot of happy clients, and life is good.
Very good.
I like happy clients.
Tell us a little bit about your company, your agency.
Well, we do tend to focus on writing because obviously content is important these days, and I'm really doing everything I can to make sure that we provide quality content so that when you actually get someone to click and you do your job with Google, the people who read it are happy with what they've read. They have learned something. They've been educated or entertained, or both. And also just making sure that we further the client's revenue expectations and desires. I was actually a revenue coach for a couple of decades in Silicon Valley, working with CEOs and entrepreneurs. So I've been helping people grow companies for a long time, and I've been writing and providing instructions about writing for a long time, and speaking about it worldwide, teaching people all over the world, including for IBM and other companies. So the idea of appealing to the customer is a big deal. The other thing is I've written a book called Roadmap to Revenue, How to Sell the Way Your Customers Want to Buy. I was actually one of the first people to identify the difference between selling versus buying and how people have a buying process and that you have to get, now people call it the buyer's journey and all that stuff. But that really was the turning point for me, understanding that there was a buying process, and if we didn't get in sync with it, we were sunk.
Very cool. Is that book available somewhere?
Oh, yeah, it's on Amazon.
Okay.
And so it's Roadmap to Revenue, How to Sell the Way Your Customers Want to Buy.
Gotcha. Awesome. Now, I want to clear up I want you to clear up some of the misconceptions. Now, when we say writing for SEO, that doesn't mean that we're talking about writing for search engines. We're talking about writing so that a person wants to read your content and come back and read more. So why don't we clarify that for people? Because there's so many content writers out there like, hey, can you SEO this for me? Well, did you write it good?
Can you be a good SEO writer without being a good writer?
Yeah.
And the answer is no. And it's actually easier to SEO something, so to speak, than it is to write for a human being, because you really do have to understand the quirks, the peculiarities, the specifics that are driving that human being. And it's not a persona. It's not a robot. It is somebody who has very specific needs and questions and a very specific buying process. And if you never interview them, which is a big mistake, the first big mistake marketers usually make, they never talk to their customers. They don't know who they're writing to. And so they're just writing to some generic, John Doe. Mm-hmm. And those of us reading it know immediately that they are not talking to us. Right. We just all know it. That's something we know when we're like 1 year old. So that fails. So the first thing you need to do is make sure you're in tune with your customers. And I know everybody talks about it, but hardly anybody does it. It's like dieting and exercising. Everybody says they know what they're supposed to do, but they don't do it. So that's one issue. The second one is that Google does require things, but it's very specific, and Google actually tries to help everybody do that as best they can. But Google needs structure. Google's a machine. Google has algorithms and things it looks for, like H1, H2, H3 tags in the proper order, in the proper way, and all of that stuff you learn when you use Yoast and other tools. Mm-hmm. It just there have to be certain requirements met, and they're very quantitative kinds of things. They're not qualitative. When you're writing for a human being, you're writing for someone that has emotions and issues and questions. That's different than writing for a machine that's looking for your H1 and H2 and H3 tags to be in the proper order in your article.
Yeah, let's go back to the very, very beginning, because, Robert, you always hear me say, if you don't know the target, the weapon really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Kristin, where do people start in finding out what should they be writing about? What is step 1A in the process?
Well, the first thing is to do something we call building an SEO persona. And I'm stealing that word from, the marketing industry, who's, I think, using it improperly. But Google needs to know who you are. Google needs not to be confused. And what I often find is that companies do a lot of writing, but it's like, let's say their keyword is application development. That's the most important thing they should ever talk about, because they're an application development company.
Right.
And so they do all this writing about it, but they never really mention application development. They don't put it in their articles. They don't put it in their pages. They don't mention the words, even those synonyms, because Google's getting better at synonyms now. That what they call latent semantic indexing, which is really exciting once you figure out how to say that. Google gets synonyms.
Yeah.
So you don't keyword stuff with that one phrase.
Exactly, yeah.
But you can have synonyms in there. So Google needs to know who you are. So we actually build these personas with our clients when we get started. And it really starts with stupidly obvious stuff like the company name. That's another thing people tend not to put in their copy. But Google looks for that stuff. Mm-hmm. Your elevator pitch. What is it you sell? What do you do? What are you associated with? What are the organizations where you can do some name dropping, like we're part of this great association or whatever? And this is another way to get backlinks. And only then, after you've kind of built that persona for yourself, and it's really clear, so you're hitting Google over the head with a 2x4, and it's in all your content that all these words always appear, then you start worrying about keywords and things that people are using to find you.
Yes.
Then the last thing, and these are like the big things you got to do. So you got to develop your persona. Then you have to find the keywords. And there's a lot of tools for that. We know what they are: SpyFu, Google Analytics, and Moz, and so on. Then you have to say, okay, what are people sharing? What are human beings sharing about this topic? So not only how are they searching for me, but what are the articles that when they do get found, people are just so excited about them and they want to share them? And that's where you can go to things like BuzzSumo and say, okay, what was the most shared article on this topic? And then you look at that article and you don't copy it, never do that, but you do say, wait, what was it about this article that made it so popular? Was it the content? Was it the format? Did they say the top 10 things, or this versus that, which is getting more and more popular these days? So you look at that and then you build that infrastructure into your article.
Good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. We were talking before the show about these personas and the fact that generationally now we're seeing that a younger person might use different phrases and have different expectations and want to get different things out of content than somebody who is maybe 50 or 60 plus. And how does that shape your SEO strategy now, knowing that we all don't use the same language and we mechanically don't search the same way to get the same thing?
Well, you're absolutely right. And this goes back to interviewing your customers. So, one, you have to know who they are. And it isn't always age. You can have an 80-year-old, believe it or not, super technical person looking for things a certain way. You can have kind of a clueless technical person in their 30s or in the millennial generation. So you can't quite generalize. You can get close, but not completely. You really do have to reverse engineer a successful sale. If you want to be profitable about all this, and we are talking about, growing your business, you need to understand how they would search. So guess what? You ask them. I mean, this is so interesting. People are so afraid to talk to their customers, but they really will help you if you talk to people who've already bought from you. They actually have a vested interest in your success. When you're selling to them, they won't tell you anything because they're playing poker. They're negotiating with you. But after the sale, they're happy to tell you what they thought about, what they saw, and what they searched for, and how they searched for it, and what was important. And that's how you find out how they search. And yes, it's going to be different, but there's also other things coming into play, which I'll just say last thing on this is that because a lot of people are speaking into their mobile devices now, they say things differently than they would. It's more conversational than they would if they were just typing and they realize, well, I've typed in 2 words. That wasn't good enough. I'm going to add a third. That's very different than saying, how can I find X? So you really do have to ask people. The good news is after you talk to 5 or 7 customers of a given type, you're going to get a trend. You're going to see the commonalities.
I mean, you can even use company or services like SurveyMonkey. Mm-hmm. Great.
No, you can't.
No?
No, I'm sorry. But the problem with surveys is I think I know what you want, and I turn it into a survey question. So I have already biased the question. I haven't asked you open-ended questions like, how do you do this? What did you think? What else did you look for? What did you think of them? That's very different. And people don't read, a lot of your more important buyers are not going to take time to fill out a survey. But if you get them on the phone and you have an appointment set aside and you've been polite about it, I teach you how to do that in my book, they'll talk to you and they'll give you all sorts of help. But no, you can't get it from it because it's already biased.
Well, let's help the person here is listening to the show, and they're the SEO person in a department for a company, but they're not involved in customer contact and they're not involved on the customer marketing side. How can they get this same input that you're describing? Because the search process is much more elongated than we tend to believe that it is. How can they get that feedback?
Well, they have to work with their marketing person then, because the marketing people, and by the way, the marketing people don't always have access to customers because the salespeople don't want marketing people talking to their customers. Okay, there's been a civil war going on between sales and marketing for as long as I've been in business, or probably longer. And they're cats and dogs. That's the other problem. Salespeople are dogs, and marketing people are cats. So there's this whole divide. However, if you push hard enough and you insist on it, and by the way, the CEOs of the world help you once they realize what you're trying to do, they think it makes all that sense, and so they will be supportive. But if you get the marketing person involved and then they have someone call and make these calls and then give the company the information, the CEO is going to lap up that conversational transcription like you wouldn't believe, even if it's 60 pages, believe it or not. So you got to get that data somewhere from somehow. The good news is you don't have to do it more than, say, once or twice a year if your market doesn't move too quickly.
Gotcha. Now, how are you saying they reach out to these people? Like by email or call them on
they
the phone,
send an email.
Okay.
No, they send an email and get an appointment. And then once you've got an appointment, then the person's going to give you an hour. And out of the, say, if you send out 30 invites via email, I'm very nice and polite. And again, I spell all this out specifically in my book. A third of them will get back to you the first time. A third of them will get back to you with a second request reminder, and a third of them will never get back to you.
So we've talked about the starting process is getting direct feedback from people that need our services or products and how they got to the end of the journey. What does that leave the listener of the show with? What's on their notepad after they conduct that exercise, or hopefully what is on their notepad after they conduct that exercise?
Well, the most interesting part, and this is where all marketing breaks down, is everybody's trying to copy everybody else, learn from everybody else. The problem is your company, your products, and your customers are completely different than everybody else. You might even have a close competitor, but they have a reputation for being ruthless and you don't, or the other way around. So even when everything else is aligned, there's going to be a difference between the type of people you attract who want to do business with you, and you want to attract more of those, the company culture and how you treat people and all that, and the product itself. And so copying somebody else doesn't really work. So this is why you do the interviews. You can do surveys after you've gotten this data because now you're doing an unbiased survey. You're confirming things. But even that doesn't matter that much. You're now going to have a picture. You'll be shocked at the amount of data that you get from these conversations. And from that, you can say, okay, all right, now we get it. They don't care about Facebook. They never look at Twitter. But man, oh man, they're on LinkedIn every day. So we really need to put our money in LinkedIn.
Kristin,
right?
let me ask you this. Now, isn't it biased, though, if you have someone for representing your company go out to talk to these people, or should you have a third-party company do that? So there is
You can go either way. I've trained inside people to do it, and I've done it as the outside consultant. Okay. Either way works. What you don't ever want to do is put a salesperson on the phone. Yeah. Because they can't interview without starting to sell. It's impossible. Mm-hmm. And the minute you start to sell and stop interviewing, you've lost them. They're just going to turn off and try to shut down the conversation as fast as possible because that wasn't the agreement. The agreement is, I want to pick your brain after you've bought.
Yeah.
So after the interview, hopefully we've got not only their media preferences, but we've got maybe their pain points and the problems that they were trying to solve on a list of paper.
Yep. And how they describe them.
And how they describe what you do.
Yeah. And they'll even tell you how your salesperson almost lost the sale. They'll say, man, oh man, he started gossiping about half an hour in. And I thought I'll never do business with this guy because he's gossiping about other clients. Right. So you don't know. The salesman doesn't know. When that happens, nobody says, oh, you're gossiping, I'm not going to do business with you. They just smile and nod and think, oh, God. But they don't let on how they feel. So anyway, go ahead.
So now we've got these pain points.
Yep.
Help our audience craft that into valuable SEO content.
So we know what they're concerned about. And then we can start doing that other research I was talking about where you go into BuzzSumo and other places and find out what articles people are sharing and the words and phrases they use around those concepts. So now you're getting concepts. I think a lot of times people focus too much on key phrases before they realize, and this is part of building your SEO persona, is you're building concepts that have a lot of, like those are the parent phrases, and then there's a lot of children phrases underneath them. So I think that's the next step, is saying, okay, these are the 5 things that are really important to people. These are the 5 ways we can address those issues and talk about them and help them solve them. And honestly, there's your first 5 articles.
Mm-hmm. All right, now on the kind of getting into the nitty gritty of that, we've got those articles, and you mentioned earlier in the show that there are certain expectations that Google has, for that content. Can you walk us through what are those things that Google expects to have as parts of that content?
Yeah, the first thing, of course, is just what I talked about with structure. So you really do need to know the basics. The keyword phrase has to be in the headline, has to be in the first paragraph, should be in a subhead. You've got to use H1, H2, H3 tags in the proper order so you don't skip, like make a subhead look a certain way. So you've decided you formatted your H4 tag so it looks better. So you don't put an H2. Google's never going to see that H4 because there was no H2 and H3. So you have to do that kind of stuff. You can use synonyms. You know, when you're writing, you can say, okay, I can say application development. I can say software program development. You know, there's other words that tie into this. So that's part of it. And then you also want to go back to your SEO persona and make sure that you've included some of those other things that were important, like your elevator pitch. You know, here are the main things we sell. So maybe at the end of the article, rather than selling them or something, you say something like, well, all the companies that do this kind of work, and this kind of work is one of your key phrases, always feel that they should do X, Y, and Z. So now you've mentioned it sort of offhandedly, but it's in the article. That just gives Google even more of a clue as to what you do.
Mm-hmm. I mean, in the co-citation around, I mean, you know, if you're talking about your brand and you're saying you're a real estate agent or a plumber, you know, those relationships, Google understands that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're giving Google context.
Yes.
You're giving Google structure and context. And those two things together, if you keep hitting the same sort of themes as you go through, Google starts not having to scratch its head anymore and say, okay, I know what these people do. And if Google really gets it, you're going to rank higher because it's obvious to Google where you fit, because Google's trying to fit something. Google's trying to organize information every nanosecond on billions of searches a day. So you're trying to help Google find your place and know where you stand, which is why those articles that sort of dance around the subject or have a lot of opinions about the subject but never mention the subject are a really bad idea.
You always tell people to think about when you're in elementary school, and I don't know if you had a class about outlining. Do you remember being taught outlining the fundamentals, and they'd give you an article and you'd have to outline it? Mm-hmm. I don't know if they still do that. Do they still do that?
Probably not.
but I think that's probably one of the best things you could teach in SEO is the art of outlining. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if you can understand that, then you can understand how the different H1 tags relate to each other. But I am meeting people now who have never been taught the art of outlining.
That's sad.
So, I mean, for example, I mean, I'm bad at analogies here. I'm just letting you know ahead of time.
Good.
If you're talking about a ship, and you mention the word boat, Google knows that a ship is a boat. Mm-hmm. You know, those type of synonyms. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I just so when you're writing, you don't have to do that, like we were talking about earlier, the exact match phrases and repeat. And It just sounds ridiculous,
Right.
Well, and it gets and suddenly by halfway through the article, the person reading it knows that you're now writing more for Google than for them.
Yeah. No,
and they'll just shut down.
Yeah. No, I've seen pages where you especially as an SEO, you're reading it and you're like, oh, they're trying to rank for
Yeah, exactly.
And how would you give guidance to, let's say that a company has a suite of services. They do A, B, C, D, E, and F. Mm-hmm. And they may not be semantically related because they're different services.
Well, then they have to build a separate program for each one.
Yeah.
And then how do they balance that versus expanding the number of pages too much and diluting any inbound links? Where's that? What counsel can we give them?
No, really. I mean, that's a balancing act. And a lot of this stuff is a balancing act. And that's why there is no clear answer very often, because you have to weigh what you're trying to accomplish. What's the main goal is first giving Google a big fat clue. So Google gets you.
The low-hanging
and then say, okay, how much do I have to contribute to that to make that work? How fresh does the content? How often do I have to do it? How much is pages versus articles and that kind of thing? And then what are my backlinks? Who's linking to me? How am I doing social? We haven't even talked about social, but that all of that. I'll tell you, this is not for the faint of heart. I mean, I've been through a long time of marketing and advertising, and I have to say that I've always been fascinated with technology. I've been into technology since technology was kind of started, digital. And this is the most complex, most demanding time that we're living in, which is why we have to keep making sure we're keeping our eyes on the strategy ball, because otherwise you get so down in the weeds, nothing you do is going to work.
And you got to do some experimentation. And the mistake that I think a lot of people make is it's a set it and forget it strategy.
Yeah.
They write their content and then they walk away from it. But think about, let's take, a classic example. A guy's an insurance agent and he sells home insurance, he sells car insurance, he sells boat insurance. To Google, are those semantically the same thing? And he needs one page that talks about auto insurance, boat insurance, and home insurance? Mm-hmm. Or does he need 3 separate pages because...
I see what you're saying. No, he needs 3 separate pages.
Because in those cases, he needs a breadth of content, and the user expectation is different for each one of those products. And that's probably the overarching factor right there, is if the user has a different expectation in his mind's eye or her mind's eye about what is the need for boat insurance versus auto insurance, that's probably where you start to make the judgments to whether or not they need to be different strategies and different pages.
Correct. Yeah, because nobody searching for boat insurance is also going to be searching for car insurance.
Right. So it all comes back to the user.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep. Google's just the gateway, and Google has very specific needs as well. So you have to meet their needs, and that's the structure mostly, and not trying to game the system, but just honestly giving Google what it wants, and Google tries to help. So, and you have a lot of metrics that you can use to see what's working with Google and what isn't. That's a beautiful part about it.
There's some other things. You brought up a valid point. And one thing about setting and forgetting is what I wanted to bring up was and this is one thing that Caleb was fantastic at, is outreach. Bringing, if you see an article that's similar to yours, but you've added some value to it, you can reach out to those people and say, hey, look, I loved your article. Check out my article if you'd like it. Maybe you can talk about it or mention it in your article. Those type of things are huge.
Right. Yep. And continually updating content. The world is changing at such a fast pace. It's almost impossible for anybody to have an expectation now that there's a piece of evergreen content out there that's going to rank really well in all conditions. Some of the variables we've talked about on the show, device, situation, different parts of the search cycle, it's going to rank consistently all those times. You've got to be able to update your content and freshen it up.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the idea of the whole social thing and reaching out, honestly, there's a full-time job for every single company where somebody sits there 24/7 and searches the web and says, oh, look, there's another topic here that could relate to us. I can send them something. It's almost like SEO PR, where you go after people who have already written on the subject and so on. That's a full-time job. Whether an entrepreneur or not can afford it or not is another question, and whether it's actually worth it or not is another question. But that could be done. If you were absolutely doing everything properly and doing it full scale, that's one of the things you would do.
Well, I think, when people start thinking about SEO as business development and not as marketing, you're going to see a shift in what you just explained. That SEO person can be cultivating and curating inbound leads almost at the same level and effectiveness as a salesperson can in making outbound phone calls.
Absolutely.
Yep, you're right. It's hard, though. It's a lot of work. I mean, we're talking about an amazing amount of grunt work, which, by the way, I mean, one of the things that's quite interesting to me, just backing up and looking at the economy in general, is that we now have applications online where you can find anyone in the world to do anything on a computer.
Yeah.
And they can be in Bangladesh or who knows where and get $5 an hour, and they're happy and you're happy, and they're just doing that work that really nobody else wants to do because they're sitting all day surfing, notifying, but that's so we're getting to the point where people don't have to be poor if they have an internet connection and they're willing to learn.
Yeah, but
amazing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a very undervalued field, and I just don't understand why people undervalue it, because once their eyes are open, they can understand. But
it's misunderstood.
It is, yeah. It's just, I guess, lack of education.
Yeah. If you think about media before SEO, the data was in the hands of a few small people, agencies, television ratings, radio ratings were all in the hands of a few small people. We didn't have access to it. Now, all the information is available to anyone. So there's a greater curiosity now and a greater opportunity to misinterpret the data as well as interpret the data. And so now you've got people that are doing their own spin on SEO to sell it and making their own hype about SEO to sell it, when now that's just adding to the confusion and the clutter that's out there about SEO.
Yep. Absolutely right.
And that's why we have this show.
That's right. To demystify and declutter SEO.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we try to give nothing but good information for people. I mean, we've got shows that are a year old, and the people can they're still relevant now.
Absolutely.
We try to keep the information clean as possible, no black hat, anything like that that's going to hurt somebody. So that's why we have people like you, Kristin.
Well, I don't wear a black hat. That's for sure.
But anyway, we got to take a break real quick. Can you hold 1 second?
Search Talk Live is sponsored by the Robert Palmer family of companies. Check out robertpalmercompanies.com for more information.
Find the true value of your home when you log on. homevalue.com.
Get your questions in on Twitter. Type hashtag Search Talk Live and your question. Now back to the show.
All right. Those of you just tuning in, we are talking with Kristin. I don't want to mess it up.
Zhivago,
thank you.
And we are demystifying SEO. And we spent the first half of the show talking about the beginning, which is we've talked about getting firsthand information when it's available and to try at all costs to get firsthand information from customers who have bought and getting their pain points and what they were looking for and what they were trying to solve and what are their media preferences. And then we talked about, once we have those topics, writing the content and certain expectations that Google has about that. And we've talked about that Google is a machine, and it's got certain expectations about the structure or the format of that content. And now we are just about to get into a little bit more of where do we go once we've got that content in our hands. Kristin, what should people think about when they're feeling good about their content? They've written it to be helpful. They've written to be valuable. What should they think about? What criteria should they have in choosing what sources or where to share their content as part of their SEO plan?
Well, they have to socialize it, obviously. Social is part of the marketing fabric now. Even if somebody doesn't follow you, they might go there when they're thinking of doing business with you or buying from you, and they just want to see what you're saying about yourself. So if your Twitter feed is filled with ridiculous stuff that doesn't help anybody, they're not going to look at you favorably. Or if they want to see how other people are reacting to your service and things like that, and customers can now hear from each other about anything. So I'm shocked that there's still people wearing black hats, because it's getting harder and harder to be a bad guy in this environment. You can't hurt customers and not have it hurt you.
It's hard enough being a good guy.
yeah, exactly. That's the truth. So I think, and the problem I see with that, with socializing, is that people tend to just go after the vehicle. Like, oh, we have to be in Twitter, or we have to be in Facebook. Well, no, hang on a second. Would your buyer ever look at Facebook expecting to find you or buy from you or anything like that? So that's the first question you have to ask yourself, is where are my buyers going, assuming that I'm going to be there? And yes, are there B2B companies that we work with that we have Facebook pages for? Yes, we put some up there. It helps with recruiting and things like that. And the more sort of soft things that they want to talk about on their Facebook page. But really, for the B2B people, they just live in LinkedIn, and they post their articles there after they've gotten it crawled by Google. You have to fetch it. So Google crawls the article originally on your blog. And then you go 2 days later or whatever in LinkedIn and post the same article. That works out just fine there, because LinkedIn's kind of a separate environment. Google does search LinkedIn. Google thinks of tweets as pages in a way. And so, you have to be tweeting generally and consistently. And again, this comes down to saying, okay, this is part of my program. I have to hire somebody to do it. They have to be dedicated to it. They have to understand my business. If they're going to tweet on my behalf, they better be doing good stuff that makes sense, that I'd be proud of. So picking that person is super important. They have to understand your business and your customers and respect that.
Yeah. And engage with them.
And engage with them. And you don't want somebody who's going to embarrass you out there in Twitter land.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kristin, in some of your writings and your podcast, you talk about a business having a Google identity. What does that mean?
Well, that is the SEO persona that I was talking about earlier. So that's you identifying the things that make you, your company, your products, even your customers and your associations with other groups and so on, and what people can do on your site. All of those things are what make you an entity to Google that Google gets. So you build that along with your customer interviews. You also build that, and you build it internally. Once you've done the customer interviews, it's pretty easy to do that with people inside the company, and you build that persona together. And then you have that. That's like a bedrock foundation for all the work you do. You always keep coming back to that and saying, how can we hit that topic again? Or how can we make sure we mention that particular association that we're part of, or whatever it is?
Yeah. We had someone mention on Twitter, they said that use contests on social media to find out what an audience wants to know. I kind of disagree with that, because then you get people that are just looking to get something for free or that type of thing. What are your thoughts?
It reminds me, and this is really going to date me, but when you went to trade shows like Comdex and things like that back in the Stone Ages in Las Vegas, and there were 200,000 people there, you could always find the people who only came there to collect buttons and tchotchkes and, and cups and mugs and stuff, so that they could put them up in their family room and say, I was at Comdex, and all I got was this lousy T-shirt kind of thing. So those people are always around, and you're not selling to them.
Right.
You really are only selling to the people. And this is why, going back to surveys, if you're a company selling to busy executives, there's no way in hell they're going to sit there and fill out a SurveyMonkey survey. Yeah. It's just not going to happen. So you have to get your information another way. And again, I said this years ago, but it's so true now. Just because you should or you can doesn't mean you should when it comes to internet and digital marketing. There's a lot of things you can do, and they're fun. Should you do it? Better check.
Yeah.
Right.
It really depends.
Yeah. Now, we've talked about writing good content. We got to talk about writing a couple other elements that are critical to your SEO strategy as it relates to on-page elements specifically. We've got to write good page titles, and we've got to write good meta descriptions. Tell us some secrets about writing good page titles.
Well, the first thing is, what's your focus keyword? And this is why, tools like Yoast are so helpful, because they really make you realize you've got to put that in there. The other thing is you're selling the click. You're not selling the thing. Right. You're not trying to get them to buy the whole thing and just swallow it down. One of the things I talk about in my book is the 4 types of products and services in the world. Every single product and service falls into one of these categories. And everybody, when I say this, knows which category their product or service falls into. It's based on the amount of scrutiny that the customer applies to the purchase. So there's light scrutiny, medium, heavy, and intense. Light scrutiny is the equivalent of bubblegum. You see it, you buy it. You don't have many questions. You don't get anybody involved. You don't sign a contract. You just buy the bubblegum and take it home. Medium scrutiny is things like clothing or a somewhat sophisticated software program. You see it, ask a bunch of questions, buy it. Obviously, the price of these things goes up as you go through the scrutiny levels. Heavy scrutiny is, okay, there's a contract, there's a salesperson, there's a test drive like a car or expensive enterprise software or whatever. And then intense is all of that and you get married. It's long term. it's you have a relationship. And this is why the whole relationship thing was such a bogus deal, because when that first came out years ago, it's like, who wants the car dealer showing up for dinner? Nobody. Okay. So you don't want a relationship with people that are selling to you. You just want to buy the thing. Get out of my way. Make it easy. Answer my questions. And if it's intense scrutiny, I have lots of questions, lots of people involved. You better be there at whatever stage I'm at in my buying process and answer those questions to my satisfaction.
So the medium is kind of like the on a whim type of thing, right?
No, that's the light.
That's light. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So on a whim, impulse purchase is light. And then medium is like clothing and things where you do have questions. And yes, you can sit on the internet now for an hour and a half trying to look for the perfect pair of jeans. It's gotten a little crazy. But still, it's not like a car or a house where there's a contract and a salesperson. Once you know where you fit there, then you can start saying, okay, what do these people need as part of that buying process? At what stage are they? And when they're at that stage, what's their biggest question? What's the answer that's going to satisfy them?
Yeah, and I think you are talking about a topic that's near and dear to my heart, that people will write descriptions and titles, and I would say this is also true for Google AdWords ads, where they try to make the sale rather than try to get the click.
Right. So
how does that scale that you just walked us through go into what I'm going to write in that page title and that description? Okay, so first question is, what do you want them to do? If they're clicking, what are they clicking for? Why are they clicking? What question are you answering? What are you offering them? And that has to tie in with your keyword phrase, whatever it is, that whatever the subject is of that article, that's your keyword concept, has to tie in somehow. So you're really giving them that. You're telling them what's behind the door and why they'd want to click on it. And you can't always fit that into the 55, 60 characters at the top. So the title just sets the tone, but then the meta description goes into a little more detail and says, okay, this is what we're talking about, but here are the 5 things you're going to get out of this, whatever it is. Or here's what you're going to get when you click on this. This is what's behind the door. You're actually selling what's behind the door.
And that's the part where you do want to sell. You know what I'm saying?
No question. Yeah. You do. And I agree with you. And I think you're a master at it, Robert, writing that description that's enticing enough to get a click on that. But it does have to be relevant enough that Google chooses it as the snippet. Because if you write something that's really seductive and action-oriented but not relevant, Google goes and finds something else on the page to pull from a snippet.
With the title for you.
Exactly, yeah.
So now you have a robot writing your meta description. Right. Oh, good.
and I don't know that people realize now that Google is actually pulling their own page titles in some cases.
Yeah.
So for people that are listening now, I think that this is a great part of the show to say, if I've got great content, but I can't get anybody to click to it, it's not bringing me any value.
Yeah.
Right.
And you can take cues from, if you look at, I know it's not SEO, but if you look at ads that are written for AdWords, you see up in the search, what's got the most attractiveness and look at your competition. I mean.
Well, you can even go to SpyFu and find that ad and say, oh, look, this is how much that they're getting, this is how often they're at the top and what they're paying for it and how well it's working for them.
And if you go to your Google Search Console and you see that you've got a wonderful average position, great volume, and horrible click-through rate, you know that you've got an issue with your description, likely.
Sure.
Yep, you're right.
And let me ask you this, and this is for the listeners. Obviously, I've been doing this for a long time, but how what's the word? My mind's gone blank. How effective is keyword research still? With Google kind of limiting the data with, any data that you can get.
Personalized results.
Yes.
Well, isn't it basic? I mean, in the sense that you still have to do it.
Sure.
And there are other tools that help. So I think you can, what do they call that? A triage or triangulation or something where you kind of come at it from different angles and you start to see a theme. And unfortunately, yes, it's gotten harder and you have to work harder to do it. And this is part of the problem with SEO is that it's hard work and people don't realize it. You can't cheat. You can't shortcut SEO.
Yeah.
You really have to get in and do the research. You really have to have a strategy. You really have to put together these personas and identities and understand what your customers want and all that. Because honestly, if you don't give it to them, they're not going to serve it up. Google's not going to serve it up and the customers aren't going to click.
Sure.
So you really, marketing used to be where you could be off the mark and think you're doing okay just because, it looked good to the boss and the boss loved it. So it must be good. But not anymore.
Yeah. I think we have to get over the hang up on volume. How many times do you see people do keyword research and the first column in their Excel spreadsheet is keyword volume? And it's one of the largest determinants about whether they're going to target that keyword. But in truth, now with personalized results and different things happening on different devices, we'd rather have a strong semantic and value relationship with the keyword than a strong volume relationship with the keyword.
Amen. And there's
and also you want the long tail. I mean, you want the ones that are less competitive too. And people have made whole livings on just going after the less competitive words that are very highly targeted. There's a lot of opportunity there.
You must have read my mind. I was going to say exactly what you just said.
Just in a deeper
we've been
voice.
on the phone too long now. We're getting to know each other too well.
In fact, Anthony made the same comment on Twitter. He says, keyword research combined with semantic research is essential. And he's basically what
I think we might even be seeing the end of the long tail, that almost everything is a long tail. And at best, we're going to be surrounded by a bunch of medium tails. Right? I mean, when you think about personalized results and device specific, and think about now when Google's so good now at sensing intent that you no longer have to put geographic indicators in your query, right?
I was just going to say that. Now you're reading my mind. I was just thinking about the near me phenomenon. And just even 2 months ago, I would have said, you've got to, if you're a local business, you've got to have, this near me, right? But now Google's assuming, or let's put it this way, the customer is assuming that Google knows where they are and they aren't typing near me as much as they used to. And they're expecting a local result.
Yeah.
The technology is kind of filling that in and taking it over. So those are the kinds of trends, yes, you have to watch algorithms and all that, but there's also kind of those ever shifting, because mobile and Google in the last couple of years have absolutely changed marketing.
Oh, yeah.
100%.
But I do want to get back to the famous debate about the pipe separator in page titles. Is it dead, Kristin? Are pipe separators dead?
Yeah, and my answer to you is I don't know. Okay? I really don't know. I mean, people tried to get the dots in phone numbers, 401 dot, whatever. It didn't quite stick. So one never knows. I mean, as we were talking about before the show, it's cool that people have found that little key and now they're using it and they feel so cool doing it. And it kind of looks good, but I don't know.
Well, there's a school of thought out there that says that titles now should be more sentence-like in structure rather than keyword-like. And because our titles before were very keyword-ish. And I think people now are transitioning to more of a sentence or phraseology in titles rather than a keyword separated by another pipe separated by a keyword.
Yeah.
Well, and that does make sense when you think about the fact that more and more people are talking when they search.
And it's more, it's contextual. It's people, Google can understand it in more of a context better, I believe.
Yeah, I think, look at the future when people start having a back and forth conversation with Google Home to find what they are rather than a static single input into a keyboard.
Well, it's kind of interesting when you think about it. Google's like a baby who's gone from learning, single words, mama, dada, whatever, to I want to go out. Right? And so Google's now starting to understand phrases and now sentences. And pretty soon, you're absolutely right. It's going to be conversational. There's going to be a chip in your right finger, your forefinger, and you're just going to talk into your finger at some point.
Yeah.
You're going to pick up a candy bar in a store and you're going to swipe your finger over it and you're going to say, does this have peanuts in it? And somebody in Omaha is going to answer that call and say to you whether it's a robot or a person and say, no, this doesn't have any peanuts in it.
Oh, you can already do that at Whole Foods with Amazon right now, by the way.
Just like a baby, just like a baby, it's into everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I hear, like I said earlier, the tilde is going to be the next big thing.
Well, then you're going to win the prize if you get that one. Good for you.
I'm joking, people. Don't do it.
Yeah.
No, but so I think it's time for our favorite part of the show.
Believe it or leave it, right here on Search Talk Live. Kristin, we're going to give you 3 statements that, yes, we did find on the internet, and we're going to ask you to tell our audience if they should believe it or if they should leave it. Are you ready?
Oh, sort of.
All right. We were talking a little bit about latent semantic indexing and semantic, and it's funny because we did see something on the internet that says Google will soon deploy an online test where you can actually see the semantic strength of one phrase's connection to another. Believe it or leave it.
I wouldn't put it past them.
I'm going to.
So I don't know.
Why do you say leave it?
Because to give that kind of information, there would be so many people manipulating that.
You're giving too many keys to the kingdom, you think?
I think so.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
Yeah.
All right.
You did a better job of answering that question. What's the next one?
Second question is, proximity will become such a key local search factor that there will soon be no need to optimize around geo-specific phrases.
I don't know how to answer that question. I think the answer is believe it, but it's, again, the problem with marketing and SEO and everything else, it depends. It depends on, is it going to not be important? What are all about the companies that don't have any need to have anybody local? So for them, that doesn't mean anything. It's only good for the local businesses, right? So I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's a key issue for a lot of people.
I would leave it, but I think it needs to be done properly. Some people say like Orlando, then you have Longwood, and they try to squeeze all that into a title. Right. That doesn't make any sense.
Right. Yep. All right, believe it or leave it. Number 3, Kristin, an external link from a .edu site with little traffic will trump an external link from a high traffic, high quality .com site.
I'm going to give you my favorite answer again. It depends.
Oh.
I mean, if the EDU thing is super, I'm losing a word. So prestigious, like it's the real big deal in your market and you're selling scientific something or other. Okay, then that one's going to trump the .com thing from the Huffington Post, right? No scientist is going to look at that and say, oh, that's going to be useful to me. So it depends.
So let me ask you this to get into that. So if it's, say, something from Penn State, and it's because the company that is on there is looking for employees, and they're linking back to your site so that they can, would you say that would be a good link or no?
These are impossible questions to answer because no, they are, because it depends. It really does depend. And again, we go back to the basic problem is everybody's trying to copy everybody else.
Sure.
And everybody's different. What's wrong with that picture? A lot. Mm-hmm. You know, you can waste all your money throwing spaghetti on the wall, the same spaghetti everybody else is throwing on the wall. But what if your users are in another room? You know, you'll miss the whole point. That's the problem with marketing. It's not like manufacturing and other parts of business where you can spend money and know that it worked or it didn't. Engineering, you turn it on. If it doesn't, you switch it on, it doesn't work. Okay, we know we blew it. Yeah. Marketing's not like that. You can spend millions of dollars and not get anything for it because you missed a particular aspect of what customers care about. And by the way, I've interviewed thousands of customers for my clients. And every single time the company said, this is what they care about. And every single time I went and interviewed those customers and what they cared about was not what the company thought they cared about.
I've heard that a million times.
Yeah. Same thing with employees.
Right?
Yeah. What employees think are important is different than what owners and managers think are important to employees.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So there you go. There's the gap. And if you're throwing spaghetti on the wall and you're in the kitchen and your whole audience is over in the living room, sorry, you know, you're losing all that. So that's the big problem. And it's really easy to spend money on marketing without paying any attention to what your customers really want.
Yeah, it's like a brand doesn't want to listen. It's like a kid, your kid gets in a fight at school and you go to the school and the principal says it's your son's fault and you're like, no, it's your fault, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think the irony in Kristin's statement is that in 2017, we sit with the most immediate feedback ever possible as marketers,
sure.
And we're still not listening to it.
Yeah. We don't want to. It's so much nicer to believe our own myths.
Yeah, very true. Do we have time for Kristin's tattoo?
Yeah.
All right, Kristin, we got to ask you for a Search Talk Live favorite to give our audience a Search Talk Live tattoo, which is your most succinct, most concise piece of advice that you can offer about the topic we've talked about today. And I just want to remind you, there's a lot riding here because Robert gets all of these tattoos.
Oh, Lord. Well, at least this year, Google rules.
No.
Google rules, and that's just this year. Okay, it might change tomorrow. Everybody thinks, you know, Google will be around forever, but golly, I've seen so many companies peak, go to the top, zoom to the top, and then flame to the bottom just through one big thing. So who knows? So far they're holding on, but who knows?
I actually think you've saved Robert a little bit of money because if I'm not mistaken, Kristin's not the first of our guests to offer the tattoo Google rules.
No?
Oh, yeah. I'm so sad. It wasn't original.
Yeah,
oh,
so
well.
I think we've saved you some money.
Yeah, thanks. Okay. I appreciate that.
That's about $150 in dinner money coming back at you.
Yeah. Well, Kristin, I want to thank you for being on the show. It's been awesome. Great conversation. I think our guests and listeners, our listeners have gotten a lot out of your insights in the SEO content realm.
Good. It was fun. You guys are fun.
Yeah.
It was great talking to you.
Same here.
Are you going to, let's say, PubCon in November?
Who are you asking me?
Yes.
Probably not.
Okay. All right. I'm all excited because I just bought tickets and
that's in Vegas, right?
Yes.
You got to remember that Kristin is an ardent sailor and she can't sail to Vegas from Rhode Island.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, guys, I want to thank you for listening to the show, and we will be back again next week. It's going to be pre-recorded because our guest is in the Philippines this time, and we're going to be recording that show tomorrow morning. So tune in next week. It'll be great. We get some advice from the other side of the world. 12-hour difference, so we're having to do the show at a different time. But thanks again for listening. I want all of you to go to Spreaker, follow us there. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Search Talk Live is sponsored by the Robert Palmer family of companies.
Find the true value of your home when you log on. HomeValue.com.
If you have questions for Search Talk Live, or you're interested in being a guest or a sponsor of the show, email Robert at searchtalklive.com. That's searchtalklive.com.